What's good, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of It's Just D. Marie. I am your girl, D. Marie. Let me get my money manifestation instant lit first before we get anything else cracking. You know, you gotta set the mood, gotta set the tone. Little money manifestation. And we're not even talking about money today, but mama need a new pair of shoes. So we're gonna have to light this money manifestation. Let it go. Okay. Good. Got that going. All right. We set. We're ready. How are you? How are you? Take a minute. Breathe. Today we're talking about something a little bit heavy, but it was on my heart to talk about it. I had a conversation with a loved one that kind of led to the topic, and I have an amazing song by Londrell. Listen, if you know anything about affirmation music, good vibe music, Londrell is like leading the way. So I don't even know how it took us this long to get to him in our playlist, but you know, that's just how the topics played out today. We're going to play Let the Trauma Go by Londrell, and we talking about the trauma torch. What the hell is the trauma torch? Essentially, that's my verbiage for epigenetics. But I want to talk to you guys today about trauma and how it gets passed through families, because I was literally just having this conversation with my mom. I took a speech class with Lisa Nichols, and she said, tell the story as though the person that is in the story is sitting right in front of you. So I'm going to try to do this as tactfully and responsibly as possible. I was having a conversation with my mom, and I was telling her that I felt like some of the trauma in my family got passed to me, right? And so a little bit of background information here was that my grandfather and grandmother actually weren't the best caregivers of their children, and there was a lot of trauma in the household. My mother was a child, and I was talking about when we would visit my grandfather, and you could just always tell when we went to my grandfather's house, you could just always tell it was something weird. It was something off, like the vibe was different. When we went to my paternal grandfather's house, we were free to run all up and down the block, like ride bikes, you know, whatever. We was with our cousins. Everybody was on the block. We were free, right? And my maternal grandfather's house, we had to sit on the couch, pretty much hands right under your legs, and not move. The whole vibe was different. You could just tell something else was going on. And so there was a lot of abuse, and I'm not going to go into any detail about it. That's not my business to tell, but there was a lot of abuse in the household. And, you know, my mom said, you know, I was talking to her about how if you don't deal with trauma and you don't resolve it, it ends up trickling around to the back out of you and into the people around you. And she said, well, I don't really know how my father's trauma and the things that he did, I don't really know how that affected you, because he never did anything to you. And I have a feeling that this is probably a lot of people's perspective, right? Like, if we know, let's say Uncle Albert is a pervert, as we like to call him, pervert, that is code for a child molester. I don't know, let's just call a spade a spade. So if you know Uncle Albert is a child molester, just because you kept your child away from him and Uncle Albert did not molest your child does not mean that your child did not have some type of residual trauma from Uncle Albert's molestation, right? The way it trickled out in my family looked like this. So my father, my mother, and I'm just talking about my mother's side, right? And again, not gonna get into detail about, the abuse that happened. It's not my business, right? But how it affects me is my business. So we will talk about that part. So my grandfather did some things that he shouldn't have done. My grandmother probably said some things that she shouldn't have done, and probably didn't do a lot of things that she should have done. My mom grew up with childhood trauma. Because of this childhood trauma, she is more reactive than normal. So let me put a pin in that statement right now, because it's not an opinion. It's not like something I made up so I read a book called What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. Now, this just so happened to come back up in my life recently. I listened to this book on Audible maybe about a year ago at this point. And it just so happens to be like the book that my university picked to be one book, one university, or whatever the case is. So it popped back up in my life. And I was like, that's so funny. I was meaning to reread that. And coincidences are not coincidences, my friend. They're often synchronicities. And so I was like, that's so funny that this book came back up. And then when we were talking about it, I remembered that in the book, Dr. Perry is talking about how trauma affects children specifically. It's very specifically pointed to children, and how that affects us as adults moving forward. And people who are traumatized often do not have, a base for frustration or, that term, going from 0 to 60, right? Man, he went from 0 to 60 and and we're saying someone went from being like calm to like ready to box in no time, right? People who have experienced trauma, unresolved trauma, don't go from 0 to 60. They go from like 40 to 60. Their reset never quite goes back down to 0. Right? They stay on edge because they are in a reactive position. We don't know what could be happening. We have to stay ready. Their nervous system does not settle down the way people who don't have trauma does. And so they stay right, depending on the level of trauma, how much they've resolved it, how much they internalized it, blah, 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 right? At a 20, 30, 40, 50. Right? Instead of 0. They never quite get back down to 0. And this is what happens when, you in the club and you bump somebody and they ready to literally kill you, right? Over spilling a drink or stepping on a shoe. You have to understand that you're dealing with traumatized people, right? A lot of times, if you're in a minority neighborhood, if you're in a neighborhood with a lot of crime or violence, these people are traumatized because of the way that they grew up, the things that they go through, often being subjected to the potential for physical violence at literally any given moment. And coming from a situation like that, a background like that, a childhood like that, adolescence, whatever the case is, doesn't let them reset to a 0. It doesn't take them quite as long to get to 60 as it does someone who came from a whole, healthy, secure environment when they were young. They learn to be reactive. They have to be reactive because the quicker you react, the more safe that you'll be in the outcome that something goes left, right? You understand? So if we are in a club and something does pop off, if I have to go from 0 to 60, I'm going to react slower than somebody who's already at a 40. They're going to be ready to move, right? They're going to jump on it. But the problem is that same level of reaction and that same survival mechanism that is functional when you're trying to avoid more traumatic experiences, when you're trying to avoid harm, when you're trying to protect yourself from a threat. It's not functional when you're in traffic, right? Somebody cuts you off and you ready. And this is where we get road rage from. you're not starting at 0. You're starting at 40. You're amped up. You already running late. Now you're at a 50. Somebody, may not have turned their blinker on and now you're ready to shoot. This is how things like that happen. A lot of times we don't understand where these things come from, but it's underlying trauma that is bubbling and bubbling and bubbling and just ready to pop. And so my mom has this same type of reactiveness, which is really what made me pay attention to this book. Is when I noticed that, I was like, not only, right, am I from Gary, Indiana, still living in Gary, Indiana, recording this right now in Gary, Indiana, but then also, like, I saw some of these patterns make sense in the things that I've seen growing up. So if my mother is a reactive person, or was much more in my childhood, she's really, time, age, maturity, spirituality, settled in a whole lot, but still has, really quick trigger moments sometimes. And the way that I reacted to that reaction was that I learned to be a peacekeeper. So what does that mean, right? Just making sure everybody's okay. Is everybody just checking in, just making sure you got what you need. Y'all all right? Listen, and my parents will leave the house. My brothers will start going at it. I'm peacekeeping, right? Listen, y'all stop playing. Now, as soon as somebody get hurt, it's going to be a fight. And we don't need, come on. And mom going to get home. She going to be mad. And come on. Everybody just settle down. Well, the way that evolved as I grew up was that I learned to shrink. Because if I couldn't be seen, I couldn't get in trouble. And if I didn't get in trouble, I wouldn't cause a reaction from a person that is more reactive than normal. My father was less reactive than normal. Like, it took a lot to get him upset. My mother, you just didn't know. You just didn't know what was gonna trip her at any given moment. And so I learned to be quiet. I learned to be solitary. Most of my hobbies were in solitude. That was it. I read and I drew, and those are solitary things. I'm quiet. I'm still. I'm minding my business. Everybody leave me alone. And as I got older, this caused me to shrink a lot and not take up the space that I should have been taking up. And I think that a lot of the things I've done could look like arrogance a little bit, just trying to do this, right? Create a podcast, got a YouTube channel, all of the things. They look like attention-seeking behaviors. They could. Except that I've never really liked to be in front of the camera. I was a technical theater major. I was behind the set. I've never really been attention seeking. It's just that I feel like I have something to say and I'm supposed to say it. Like, that's where we're at right now. But that's an evolution of my personality. That's me learning to say, get out of your own way and stop minimizing yourself. Like, make people tell you they don't want to see you. Make people tell you they don't want to hear what you have to say. But in the meanwhile, if this gets 8 views, 10 views, I could have helped somebody. So I'm going to do it. And you never know. But that's an evolution. I very much shrink in situations, especially when it feels like there could be confrontation. If ever there's a moment where I feel like I could have the potential to upset someone, I shrink, I diminish, I cower, I crawl away. And that shit is that's not how I want to live. That's not who I actually am. Like, I am here to take up the space. I want all of the smoke. Not like confrontation smoke, but like, I came here for a reason, to do a thing. Like, let's do it. And I don't really care how people feel about it in reality. But what I realized was that I'm reacting when I do shrink, and when I peacekeep, I'm reacting out of a traumatized part of myself. So did my grandfather have to abuse me in order to actually abuse me? in order to actually traumatize me? No, he didn't. And I don't know what happened to him, because hurt people and healed people heal people. Right? So he was probably a hurt child. Odds are, knowing some things about his father, he was probably a hurt child that in turn hurt his children. And even though my mother didn't hurt me the way her father hurt her or her mother hurt her, the way that she moved around that trauma instead of tackling it and overcoming it and, healing it, hurt me. And, I've told you guys, I think in the intro, that my girlfriend is, in the tail ends of IVF, and just the awareness that I'm trying to become a parent has made me really have to sit down and look at all of these things and say, now, if this person hurt that person and that person hurt this person and then it morphed and then that person, hurt me, not intentionally, but by proxy, right? Odds are I am going to hurt my child if I do not heal this in me right now before the child shows up. And it just really, it made it real. Like the way that we pass trauma, the way this trauma torch, the way that we pass along hurt if we don't heal it is so tangible. And I think, again, just because he didn't do the thing to me that he did to you doesn't mean that didn't reach me. It still reached. And I know I'm not the only one. Bruce Perry and Oprah wrote a whole book about this stuff. And let me tell you something else. I think everybody in the world is traumatized on some level, and especially post-COVID. I don't even know how anyone, if you had a crispy, perfect record before that, I don't know how you got through COVID without some level of trauma. That shit was traumatizing. If you really want to sit down and get into it. But I think everybody needs to read this book. I think it's one of the most important books I've ever read in my whole life. Asking what happened to you instead of just going straight on the attack to someone, even if you don't say it out loud, but in your mind, is a game changer. It puts you in a position of compassion right away. And we all need more compassion. You know what? This is what I'm going to do. I am going to go right into today's hit, and then I'm going to pick back up the second half of the conversation because I want to talk to you guys about something that I realized. In this same vein, I was talking to my girlfriend, and I had such a great revelation about how the shrinking and the hiding and the running away from confrontation affected my life, and even professionally. It's wild when you sit down and extrapolate all this stuff. But right now, we're going to go to Let the Trauma Go by Londrell. If you don't know Londrell, you need to look into him. He got some good shit. All of these songs are from the Right Foot playlist on Spotify. You could search it. You could follow it. You could download it. I don't know if you could download it. I might have just straight made that up. It was just rolling off of the tongue. But this is Let the Trauma Go by Londrell. Get into it.
Just imagine, let your trauma go. What freedom would come to you if you lived like nothing was yours? Not your thoughts, not your feelings, not your possessions, not even this body. How boundless and free you would be. Pain, hurt, stress, worry. Let the trauma go. Pain, hurt, stress, worry. Let the trauma go. How you feel? Tell me how you really feel. Let the trauma go. How you feel? Tell me how you really feel. Let the the trauma go. Baby girl, tell me what's the big deal? You been holding on for 6 years. I know love is the cure, but you sick still. Can't sit still, you gotta switch gears. Love yourself cause you a big deal. They big mad cause you big blessed. Got a big check. Yeah, don't stress yourself. Protect yourself. Invest in self. Express yourself like how you feel. Tell me how you really feel. Let the trauma go. How you feel? Tell me how you really feel. Let the trauma go. I know you traumatized. You got a storm inside. I know your daddy hurt you. I know your mama lied. I know you wanna find light in the summertime. I watch you come alive. Woman, you're so divine. Like whoa, pain, hurt, stress, worry. Let the trauma go. Pain, hurt, stress, worry. Let the trauma go. How you feel? Tell me how you really feel. Let the trauma go. How you feel? Tell me how you really feel. Let the trauma go. Let the trauma go. Let the trauma go.
That's Let the Trauma Go by Londra. That is such a, oof, that one gets me on the inside. Okay, so what I was telling you guys before the break, I had a conversation with my girlfriend the other day, and I didn't even think that this would possibly be related to what I was talking to my mother about, but oh my God, it certainly was. So she told me the other day that no is a starting point of negotiation for her. And I was like, what? She said, yeah, if somebody tells me no, I'm like, yeah, okay, no, right, but it's not yet, right? So tell me how we need to get to a yes, and then I'll do the thing that gets us to a yes, and then your no becomes a yes. So it's a not yet. It's not an actual no. You're not actually saying no. You're saying you don't quite qualify yet. And then she's like, okay, well, just tell me what I need to do, and then I'll do it. And then and I was like, paradigm shift. I was like, are you kidding me? Because of the peacemaker, because of the shrinker, because of trying to avoid conflict, if I even think the answer is no, I don't bother asking the question. And that, like, if I really sit down and think about how many ways and times I've done that in my life, I would probably bawl for the rest of the night, because it's such a restrictive position to say I'm not even going to bother them with a question because they're probably going to say no anyway. But like, what if they don't say no? And I've shut myself down even so many times, like, it blows my mind. I just, I'm in school again. My fault. Sorry to hit the thing. I'm in school again, and one of the, looking for internships and jobs and for post school and all of the things. And the fact that the employment recommendation is if you meet 60% of the criteria, apply for the job anyway. What? That's their job requirements. They require those things. Why would I apply if I don't have all of the requirements? But that's the mentality, and that's what that trauma matriculated into for me. Oh no, I'm not even gonna bother. No, it's not gonna work out. I don't have the qualifications. I don't have the credit score. I don't have the experience. I don't know that one. I don't know Final Cut Pro. So I'm not even gonna bother. I'm not gonna get that. That's nuts. That is wild. What my life could look like by now if I was a person that pushed at no instead of tried to avoid getting a no in the first place. You know how many more chances I would have tried to take? How many more opportunities I would have explored if no would have been a starting point instead of something that I was trying to avoid completely anyway. And this is what happens. This is the trauma torch. This is the trauma torch. It doesn't turn, it's not the same thing. It's not that, the abuse that he received was abuse that he received was abuse that my mom received was abuse that I received was abuse that I'm going to pass on. No, it's not like that. It's like the way I dealt with the trauma is going to be different than the way that my daughter deals with it if I don't heal it. Which is going to be different than the way that she passes it on to her child if I don't heal it. And I refuse. It morphs every time because the way that the person that passed it to me, they morphed it a little bit. They did something a little bit different. They didn't, because we don't actually want to pass on trauma. So a lot of times we tweak it a little bit. We don't do quite the thing. We do something thing-ish. Or we do a reaction to the thing, but the reaction to the trauma is still trauma. If someone hurts you and you react from a broken place, from a hurt place, that reaction is still trauma. It's still traumatic. And so you think because you don't do that thing that you're getting out of trauma's way, and you're not. You just flipped it. It's just a different version. It's got a new face. It's still trauma. And so we really got to learn how to sit down in somebody's goddamn therapy office and say, yeah, this has been plaguing me for a really long time, and I just need to let it go. Like Landrell said, let the trauma go. And it's not that easy. And I'm not trying to sit here and make it sound like it is. Right? But we have to start somewhere. Oprah said in the book, What Happened to You? She said, no matter what has happened, you get a chance to rewrite the script. And that's true until the day you die. It's never too late until you leave here. Once you leave, you can never say it, you can never fix it, you can never heal it, you can never take it back. But until then, you got a chance. You got a chance to say, I never faced that thing. I never did. And I know that it affected you. And I'm sorry, and I'm going to go get some help for that. Oprah also says in the book, the way you treat a child from the time the child is born is what sets them up to either succeed or to struggle. And I've seen that with myself. And again, I didn't go through, I know people who went through things way, 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 way worse than anything I went through. But it's not the point. We're not comparing. We're not comparing trauma here. The fact of the matter is, everybody needs to go through their own stuff, sit down and analyze what happened to them, ask themselves the questions, and then resolve their issues so that they do not pass it on to the next generation or the people around them. Even if you don't have kids, the people around you are taking in your reactions. They're taking in those trauma reactions, and they're getting things that they don't deserve. So let's let the trauma go, y'all. Stop passing along that trauma torch. Hurt people, but heal people. So let's become healed people. I love y'all. I pray you have love and light, health and wealth, strength for you need it the most. Don't forget to sign up for that positivity push if you want some good daily nuggets. Text 773-923-1980 and sign up for that. Also, the Right Foot playlist on Spotify, you can find that. And find me everywhere. All of the socials on just_D_Marie, including YouTube. I will see y'all around the way. Take care of each other. Put out that trauma torch, y'all. Somebody got to do it. It should be you.